I want to thank my friend BJ for saying yes when I asked to bring the following guests from Indianapolis. I hope they don't have any problem on having them on the mic, but a year ago, not even a year ago, actually 6 months ago, I was in Indianapolis, and I heard an amazing story, and I came back and I asked Regina and Phil, the mayor, just about anybody I could find, if we could possibly bring these folks in to share their story, and they're going to do that in just a minute. But I want to tell you just a little bit about them. Can y'all still hear me? Yeah. Bart Peterson was the mayor of Indianapolis, the 12th largest city in our nation, from 2000 to 2007. He had a distinguished career in the corporate world and also was an attorney, but he gave that up like our mayor for public service. He also served as president of the National League of Cities in 2007. During his tenure as mayor, he did some extraordinarily exciting things that I'm going to let him tell you about, but they affected children in a big way. This last year, he was a fellow with the Institute of Politics of Harvard University's Kennedy School, the Kennedy School of Government. And he has been working most currently with Strategic Capital Partners, which is interested in bringing change across the nation, not just in Indianapolis, to groups like ours. And so we're very thankful for his input. He's a graduate of Purdue and the University of Michigan Law School, where I think his daughter, Amy, also attends.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My name is Bart Peterson, and I am thrilled to be here today. I just want to say how much I appreciate seeing all of you and having the chance to talk about education and education reform and community redevelopment, the subjects that are closest to my heart, both when I was mayor and also in my afterlife here. I just want to say to Phil that David and I are here representing a not-for-profit organization called My Trust, and we wore our nonprofit gang colors today, blue suits. So we're all set. We're all set to do battle. But the fact of the matter is, it's good to be around people who care about these issues. And I was very appreciative of hearing the mayor talking about his passion for the redevelopment and the renaissance in many ways of the West Dallas community, based not just on education, but housing, community spirit reconstruction as well. Vitally important aspects of pulling communities back together again, and that's what my day job is now, as Rosemary said. That's what my passion continues to be. I want to say a word of appreciation to my friend BJ Steinbrook, who broached the subject of us coming here today, and I thought, what a wonderful thing. I love Dallas. I don't get there very often. I'm going to have a chance to spend a little bit of time there. Mary, you know, I always used to say when I was in office that the worst part of the job is I always got to cut the ribbon on the museum, but I never got to go in, because I always had to go on to something else. So I vowed when I left office that I was going to enjoy things, that I was going to take the time to go into the museum. And so true to form, I got to Dallas at 10 o'clock last night, have meetings all day, I'm going to leave the second I get done. But that tells me that I just have to make a special trip down here, get back, spend a little bit of time, if I might, with some of you in West Dallas, because the story is phenomenal just from everything I have heard here this morning and what I learned before I got here. So congratulations to all of you for coming together to do this vitally important work. Let me tell you a little bit about coming together to do important work based on our experience in Indianapolis. We're going to talk about two things here today. We're going to talk about our charter schools initiative, which is unique in the country, and then I'm going to sit down and David is going to talk about the work of the Mind Trust, which is the 501c3 organization that is focused on human talent. When I was running for mayor back in 1999, I decided that education was going to be one of my major issues. And while that may not sound so unusual today, Back then, it was still a little bit unusual, and 5 or 10 years before that, it was really unheard of, because mayors had the opportunity, which most of them availed themselves of just sort of staying out of the education issue entirely. Most mayors, in fact, virtually none back then, had any authority over schools whatsoever. No real interest in getting into the challenges of public education. They sort of looked at it as a no-win situation, so most stayed away from it. But that's changing, and I would say it's changed pretty dramatically in the last 10 or 15 years. I decided education had to be part of my platform, both as a candidate and serving as mayor, for a number of reasons. I'll sort of give them an ascending order of importance to me personally. One was economic development. We simply, with a reputation for having a poor public education system in the city, it was not only failing to produce young people who were capable of being the workforce of the future, but it was also hurting our reputation as we looked to recruit companies to the city. Secondly, the social ills that came from having a high dropout rate and a high failure rate in general within our traditional district schools, particularly the urbanized districts, with which I have 11 school districts in the city of Indianapolis. It's kind of a strange thing. But we have that one centralized main district called the Indianapolis Public Schools. And with a high dropout rate contributing to things like neighborhood deterioration and crime and other social ills, or at least a correlation between those two, it seemed to me that it was an issue that could not be ignored. Sort of next up the ladder was that we were losing people in large part because the metropolitan area wasn't losing people. They were just moving out of the city and moving to the suburbs because they didn't feel the educational system was serving their children. And so to keep a middle class in the city, it seemed to me it was essential that we improve our system of public education. But the fourth reason was really the most important, and to me the overriding reason, the one that has motivated me ever since, and that is the lost human potential that was occurring when kids simply weren't getting educated. If they were graduating, and such a high percentage of them were not graduating from school in our city. We were losing thousands of our young people who were going to be condemned to lives of, at a minimum, lost potential, and potentially and frequently much, much worse. So I had to decide what reform measure I was going to be behind. It had to be something transformative. I wasn't interested in half measures, it had to be transformative. And I looked at 3 different things. I won't go into too much detail about the other 2, but the 3 I looked at were charter schools, which I'll get to. I also looked at mayoral takeover of the schools. The mayor were actually running the public school district. I didn't give that too serious a thought because of it's sort of a long story, but the political foundations didn't sort of seem to be right to make that possible. Our schools hadn't quite hit the rock bottom level that so many other cities, in which they had so many other cities where the legislature stepped in and said, hey, we're going to give the schools to the mayors, and mayor, let him see if he can, or she can handle it. So I didn't look too seriously at that course. A school voucher program seemed to me, whatever its merits might be, so controversial that there was very little chance that we could ever reach any kind of consensus around it. So I chose charter schools. What I believe were a transformative education agenda, a transformative education vehicle, but might have the chance someday of being able to build consensus around it because they in fact were public schools. I'm still waiting for that consensus to emerge. I sit here 11 years later, still hoping and believing that that's possible. I do believe it. We aren't there yet, but maybe someday we will be. So, we sought legislation to have a charter school law in Indiana, which at that time we did not have. There was no such thing as a charter school in Indiana. In 2001, the second year I was in office, the law passed. And the whole reason I'm standing here talking to you today is because that law had a unique provision in it. It's the 36th, 37th state to pass. We were the 36th, 37th state to pass a charter school law. But ours provided that the mayor of Indianapolis would be a charter authorizer. And we didn't realize it at the time, but that may be the only mayor in the country that could actually grant charters to schools and, in essence, create a whole new sector of public education in our city.